Good evening, Internet. Good evening, everyone. On a day which it might be Friday, it might be Saturday. I'm personally a little bit confused, but it's definitely one or the other. And once again, please welcome my guests, you, James, 1978.
Hello there, this is James Scrotty, James 1978, and hooray for the weekend!
Hooray! And Dr. Smith.
Hello, everyone.
And, right, again, article linked in the description. Now, this isn't an entirely new phenomena. It's people, I suppose, because of the age of the sort of media that we have now, people see something terrible happening. Do they help, or do they take out their camera phones? For one reason or another, and I think this actually even happened a few years back with the London bombings. There's quite a lot of footage, but sometimes you think, in fact, there's a reference in a show by David Rennick, a writer that I know you know, James.
Yeah.
And he wrote a show called Love Soup, and there's a bit where there's a character with a glass eye who talks about how he lost an eye in the 7/7 bombings. And initially this evokes sympathy, that he's lost an eye in a terrorist attack. And it turns out he was in one of the train tunnels, and he was filming what was going on his phone, including videotaping this woman who whacked him in the face with something, and that's how he lost the eye. Which, although that's a comedy sort of making light of something terrible, there's also something quite poetic about it. You think he's some poor victim. In fact, he got hit in the face of being the arsehole who was filming it on his phone instead of doing something to help the victims, which is a thing that happens. There is potentially an excuse for this in some cases. For some people, the lens creates a distance. I've heard of this. It creates a barrier. You're not seeing it with your own eyes. You're seeing it through a camera lens. But the very culture that it can be that it literally seems like almost no one is helping. Which actually we do have a law in the UK since the Diana death. We've had a law. I think it's called the Good Samaritan law. I think that's in a few countries actually. That it's not necessarily legal to stand by and not help somebody. And in this instance, people were literally burning to death. And as it says in the article, the officer had never before in his life prayed for someone to die faster. And where were the people offering up anything? Just water. Who has a fire extinguisher? And most people were more interested in getting footage. James, your thoughts?
In psychology, in sociology, this is called the bystander effect, and no, it has nothing to do with the rise of social media. I reference I cite perhaps the most cited, the most infamous example, the murder of Kitty Genovese in 1964. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. 37 people who saw the murder didn't call the police. The murderer came back twice. I believe it was over the course of half an hour to stab her again while she lay bleeding to death. And the people who were watching from their apartment windows, in some cases, turned off the lights so that they could have a better view.
Mm.
So, yes, the rise of social media might have exacerbated the already existing problem, but there does seem to be something fundamental, neurological, instinctive in human psychology. We cannot cope with tragedy. We don't know how to cope with tragedy. Because I asked you, if you saw a woman laid on the floor, bleeding to death, screaming, what would be your first reaction? Your first reaction would be to freeze. Your mind would go blank. You would be nauseated. Yes, you would reach for your phone, but you would be nervous. And anything you knew about medicine or first aid, unless you had been thoroughly trained, would, like a paramedic or a police officer, would just go out of your mind when you see someone dying. And also, there is I can't remember the specific name. It's been so long since I studied psychology. But whatever the crowd is doing, you join in. If the crowd is angry, if the crowd is cheering, you cheer. You might not even know what you're cheering for, but you following the crowd. And if the crowd is just standing there not doing anything, you just stand there as well. Everyone watching each other, glancing at each other. Wait, what are we going to do? What? Should I? Isn't anyone? Oh, no, so just stand here quietly then.
Right.
And everyone else has their... So again, this could be an extension of that. Everyone else has their phones out taking footage. So what?
So hang on, can I ask you, because not long ago I was on a train and somebody pulled the emergency cord. And it transpired that what the man's problem was a diabetic fit.
Yeah.
And the emergency services were called, I think, and the train, of course, couldn't move beyond that station and what have you. Everybody was gathered around trying to help. Are you saying that, like one person noticed, pulled the cord, tried to help, someone else got in?
Yes, that's the thing. When everyone is rushing to help, then helping becomes the normal group behaviour.
Right.
But when everyone's just gathered around watching and no one's taking action, then that becomes the normal group behaviour. Or when one person knows what to do because they're a doctor or what have you, but nobody else does know. You're just standing there like a lemon.
Okay, I have a second question, because I thought the bystander effect was that, two things. One, you assume that somebody else has called the emergency services.
That's it. Everyone's standing around, somebody else will have called. Yeah.
And am I right in thinking that the more witnesses there are, the bigger problem there is? Because if I'm one of 100 people, I assume that at least one of the other 99 must be doing something. And if I were the only witness, then I would have done something. But I've got these other 99, so it's somebody else must be doing it. Okay.
Exactly. It's herd mentality in a nutshell.
Right. Okay. Dr. Smith.
To me, it's very disheartening to see that social media has come to this, to where you've got people standing around. They'd rather film a terrible thing going on instead of trying to help. Granted, we had one guy in the article that the police officer said, hey, go around to people and see if anybody's got a fire extinguisher. And that guy readily went. But you had the rest of these people standing at this accident, just filming or taking pictures. One woman going up to the car to where the police officer had to tell her to get away from it, while he's just standing there, heartbroken over these people. And as he said in the article, he respectfully wished that they would just die a quick death, not because he wanted them to die, but rather so they would.
If I'd been in his position, an off-duty police officer, presumably carrying a weapon, because in many parts of America, especially Texas, I do believe that even off-duty police officers have to be armed, I would have sent them on their way.
Yeah, I could see that, and I would even agree with that. I would even agree with that. But back to the point, it's getting to the point, using this article as a stepping stone, the social media and how it's being used in a negative manner is just terrible. You've got. Go ahead.
I would say, again, the whole point of my previous monologue, rant, whatever you want to call it, was that, no, this isn't necessarily a social media issue. In a way, in fact, I think this ties in to what we were discussing on Thursday. The behaviour of children, adolescents, teenagers, what have you. So, what shall we do about it? Well, we'll punish the parents, etc., etc., etc. This new digital age that we're in one instance, parents not necessarily being there to raise the children, and certainly not raising the children as they did 100 years ago. In the other case, social media. Where things like filming, tragedy, etc., are becoming the norm. It's a question. Blaming the new thing or focusing on the thing that's different. The underlying issue is still the same. As I said on Thursday, the idea that there were no unruly children, no teen pregnancies, etc., before the wishy-washy lefty liberal socialist pinko commie Jew fags banned good parenting or banned prayer in schools. No, they didn't. You can still pray. You can't. It's just that you can't force people to pray. For fuck's sake, let that go. So. Yes. Oh God. There are serious social media issues. Things like happy slapping, where people deliberately assault other people on camera, and then share it with their friends in a macho pissing contest to see who can look the coolest, who can commit the most horrific crime on camera.
Yeah.
That is a serious example. But the point you raised about the police officer telling the man in the white shirt to go around, get water, get fire extinguishers, anything, that was an example of someone taking charge. If he had stood in front of the burning car, you call 911. You, all of the rest of you, go back to your car. Fire extinguishers, waters, blankets, anything to put out this fire quickly. Come on.
Yeah.
If someone taking charge of the situation, when people are in that herd mentality, literally waiting for someone else to take action, looking at each other. What, are you going to do something? Or are you waiting for me to do something? What about him? People.
Well, I think with him, I can't speak for him directly, but I would say if I were in his shoes, being a former military police officer, and granted I didn't have a ton of things happen at my base, you got to be quick on your toes, and granted sometimes you're just thinking, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I think that goes for anybody. I would think that he might have just had that moment where he didn't think to tell all these people, this is what he's got, what do you got to do? Let's do this. Let's do that.
Exactly. That's the thing. As a police officer, as a former military police officer, you would, in most cases, you were trained. And what I'm saying is, the fact that these people were standing around waiting for someone to tell them what to do, it's not necessarily that the off-duty police officer should have told them what to do. It's that they will. If they had, then they wouldn't have just been standing around with their cell phones.
And on that bombshell, if we could have final thought and goodbye from you, James.
This is a hell of a lot bigger than social media, and may the great holy donkey forgive us all.
Aha. And final thought and goodbye from Dr. Smith.
My final thought on this is when you're pointing your camera phone at somebody and there's an incident going on, be a little more thoughtful about what you're filming And if it's an issue where it's something you could be doing instead of filming with your fucking camera, help these people, Be a good Samaritan instead of that.
Just reminds me of one stand-up comedian in America in the 1990s, summing up the Rodney King beating. To the people who filmed the attack, which it was used as evidence in the trial against the police officers who beat me, next time something like that happens, put down the damn camera and help me.
True.
Indeed. My only final thought is I've never driven a car, but I know that a lot of the time there is a fire extinguisher in the back. I don't know if it's mandatory or if I know it's a common thing that I've seen. I like to think if I were a driver watching this and I had the fire extinguisher, then I would be the one or one of the people to actually assist. But I suppose I don't know because I've not been in that situation. But in any case, it's a good night from James, it's a good night from Dr. Smith, and it's a good night from me.